Hello everybody, welcome back. Today you have the rare pleasure of seeing me in my glasses. That's because I'm going to do a walkthrough on an art book, another art book. This is Picasso 1932 and it is the exhibition catalogue currently accompanying the blockbuster show at Tate Modern of Picasso's works from the year 1932. Now, I only occasionally do these reviews. I wish I could do more, but I know that there's a groundswell of you who are really enjoying them. So that's why I'm going to continue this. And the reason why I've picked the Picasso 1932 exhibition is not only is this an enthralling and revealing show, but the catalogue itself is excellent and one that I would recommend to art lovers, particularly Picasso fans. Because let's be honest, there are times with Picasso that you just think, there's nothing else I can learn about this man. There's no show that can teach me anything new. There's no catalogue that can show me a plate I haven't seen. And that was one of the big challenges for the Tate, is how do you program a Picasso exhibition? Because everyone, yes, they enjoy it. He is the great man. But what something new could you bring? And fascinatingly, this is actually Tate Modern's first ever Picasso solo show. You wouldn't even think that was possible, right? But it is. And they've done something monumental to commemorate this grand occasion. Picasso 1932 is focused on the year of wonders. 1932 was a year of remarkable output and a really noticeable transformation in Picasso's work. Now, that may seem, well, by the by, but actually we have to place this year in context before we start. At the end of 1931, Picasso turned 50. This is a pretty seminal mark for anybody, but for Picasso, this was a particularly interesting mark because, yes, he was the world's most famous artist, but what more could he bring to the show? And there was a real whisper that perhaps Picasso, who in 1932 was due to have his first ever retrospective in Paris, was actually an artist that was more from the past. After all, his famous blue, his rose, his cubist periods had all been and gone. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, the painting that heralded the start of modern art, was already over 25 years old. And yes, in 1931, one of Picasso's paintings set an auction record, but it was a painting from 1905. So even though Picasso was hitting 50 and could seem superficially in his stride with all these great accolades and wealth, he was actually wondering, am I still an artist that has something to give the community and something to deliver? He was a very competitive and vain man, Picasso. Don't let that be said that he was a benevolent person. He knew how to rise to the occasion. And 1932 shows a man determined, for all his accolades, for all the compliments and greatness thrown at his feet, a man willing to challenge himself and his art, to reinvent himself, to look at new sources and to bring something fresh to an already extraordinary back catalogue of works. And that is why 1932 is called the Year of Wonders. And the Tate does this year a huge testament. It fills its massive galleries with some of the world's most famous paintings. I know you're recognizing Le Rêve, drawn from private collections and famous museums and galleries across the world. And they hang all of these paintings from 1932. There's over 100 pieces of work, you know, whether that's painting, sculpture, works on paper, in chronological order. And they also put the dates on when the paintings were painted. And it's extraordinary when you see some of these works were painted in an afternoon. So he does masterpieces that could take people forever, and he does them. Anyway, that's Picasso. So let's start where we were. So Picasso was at a crossroads, but that was also true of his private life at the time. For though he was married to Olga and had a son, he was deep into an infatuation with Marie-Therese Walt, the young blonde who was 28 years his junior. However, their relationship was largely private and kept out of the public eye. But as Picasso's year progressed, that relationship would come more in the open and the tensions would spill over. So let's start at the beginning, because the beginning of the year starts with love. We start off with Picasso's beautiful, colourful pictures of Marie-Therese Walt. We see the beautiful romantic colours. We see the beautifully composed, pretty young muse sat on her sofa. These are idealized descriptions of a beautiful woman. Sentimentalized, yes. I mean, as we all know, Picasso was a red-blooded heterosexual male. But what's interesting about these is how much passion and intimacy these have. This exhibition was shown largely at the same time as Modigliani, whose nudes were very stylized and quite harsh. And what's interesting about Picasso's works of Marie-Thérèse Waltz is, even though Picasso was an arrogant man, he brought such tactile gentleness into his nudes. They are remarkably sensual. So we have, in particular, this will be a good sobering. So this is Tuesday the 8th of March 1932. He did this painting in a day. This painting is the size of the bookshelves behind me. It's mammoth. And you thought, gosh, that's beautiful. 2 days later, he paints this, same size, vast. 3 days later, he paints this. These paintings are huge and they're perfect. The skin is so smooth. Picasso's lines are so deliberate and so generous. You can feel the sensuality in these paintings. And the Tate has hung them side by side, as they've done in this book. And it's a week. It's a week. 3 masterpieces done in a week. And Picasso could be an idiot. I mean, this was the man who said, I am a woman. And his marginalization and diminution of the woman and women's experience is highly notable. But my goodness, when he painted them, and he could paint beautifully. But these are all very pretty nude, beautiful colours. Picasso was very much in competition with Matisse at the time, so there's a great investigation and use of colour. But Picasso wanted to do something more with his nudes. And it was at this point that he really took up the interest in Shunga, particularly Hokusai's very famous painting of the fisherman and the fisherman's wife, where this very erotic Japanese woodcut Japanese drawing has an octopus fixed very deep into the private parts of the woman, and the octopus's tentacles are wrapped all around the woman in deep, passionate, erotic sensuality. Now, Picasso was fascinated by this, and he was fascinated by the use of bringing in the octopus almost as an element of surrealism. So he started bringing in tentacles as a means of bringing in erotica and an investigation of form into his paintings of Marie-Thérèse Waltz. So what you see from April onwards is his nudes and his paintings of Marie-Thérèse Waltz are all over this idea of the octopus. And it keeps going, give me time. So all the time he was fascinated by this octopus. But what's interesting is that in Hokusai's images, the octopus was wrapped around the woman. Picasso has made the woman the octopus. How her deep tentacles are just so seductive and are there to be wrapped around the man, to devour the man. This was a man who Picasso, I mean, look, Marie-Thérèse Waltz was 28 years, Walter was 28 years younger than the great Picasso. The balance of power between them was just bizarre. But yet he paints Marie-Thérèse as if she has the sensual power, as if she is the erotic, as if Picasso is completely enchanted by her and all his defences are down by her sexuality and her tentacles. And that's what's so fascinating about these works. He never stops with the octopus. But these paintings are daily. I mean, that's what's so extraordinary about this book and about this exhibition, is that Picasso's output was constant. And people who were visiting his studios in Paris were amazed by this nudes, by this originality. And of course, that's where the problems began for Picasso's private life, because it was quite obvious these were not paintings of his wife, Olga. And in fact, this was quite obvious to Olga too. So she left, took her son with her, and left Picasso in quite a deep quandary. Picasso at that time was very much focused on getting his retrospective in place in Paris. The previous year had seen Matisse's, and Picasso was adamant that his retrospective would be better. Very vain man, obviously. But this was 1932, and even though he could be involved in his own selfish world, there was no doubting the problems that were going on in the world around him. 1932, the Great Depression was about kicking in. And of course, Picasso being Spanish, he was very aware of the rise of fascism, both in Spain and of course over the border in Germany. The dark clouds of war and of certainly hostility and hate were looming. And not even Picasso could be immune to those. So what you see after the summer, what you see is Picasso starting to investigate darker themes. He was particularly fascinated by crucifixion. So he started investigating a pattern of forms of how he could represent the crucifixion, where he would look at transforming and morphing the very obvious scene of Jesus on the cross, reducing it constantly, as Picasso would, to its very basic elements of bones on a cross, challenging representation, challenging how he could represent the crucifixion. And all these drawings, all these paintings are in the exhibition, and it shows Picasso moving into darker territory. What also happened towards the tail end of the year is that his muse, his girlfriend, his mistress, had a severe accident. She was a great swimmer, Marie-Thérèse, and she unfortunately in October, in the autumn of that year, got a severe viral infection from swimming in very dirty water. She was very ill for a time. And in fact, she lost all her trademark blonde hair after this, and it never grew back. So this woman, this beautiful, perfect woman, her visual was lost forever. Picasso, as you can imagine, was greatly traumatized by this. And he then went in the tail end of his year, started work on a series of works that he called The Rescue. Here you can see a man pulling a drowning woman out of a river. This was very much Picasso's fear. Picasso's sister had died very young of diphtheria, and there are some theories from various biographers that Picasso therefore at this time built up a complex that he was doomed to harm any woman that came into touch with him, that he just, where Midas turned everything to gold, he felt that he turned women to stone and that he was always damaging them. I do not know enough about Picasso to say whether that's true, but certainly this idea of the rescue obsessed Picasso, and we went into the tail end of the year with Picasso again and again drawing these traumatic scenes of trying to rescue a dying woman from a river. What's interesting is how you see the forms change. So yes, we're seeing the colour go and the darkness emerge. These start to become darker, more traumatic. But what's interesting is as you can see the figures emerge, you start seeing different forms of representation and the way Picasso would represent certain things emerging into something that we would see very familiar in a few years. So this is the first painting of 1933, which is where the exhibition ends, and it's still The Rescue. But can you see how the sensuality, the form, the fluid, loose limbs of the human form have been replaced by something very sharp, very angular, very angry? These are traumatic figures. And you can see in the deliberate lines and the greys and the hardness something that would, of course, lead on into Guernica. So that was how 1932 ended. For a year that started with love, ended in depression and tragedy and immense difficulty on Picasso personally and in the wider political scene. However, Picasso charted that amazing transition in artworks of the most extraordinary caliber and level. Picasso 1932 is rightly called the Year of Wonders. I cannot think of another artist who has painted such an extraordinary catalogue of works in a single 12-month period. These were not average pieces of work. They are masterpieces. Each vast painting that you see is beautiful. Its investigation of form and representation is original and mind-blowing. You know, Picasso was always creating. He never said, I think he said, I never write my biography, I write who I am in art. And it's like these incredible works are masterpieces of his personal diary. It's an extraordinary exhibition. This catalogue is, of course, as usual with exhibition catalogues, accompanied with essays, similar to what I'm saying now. So that gives you context to all the artworks and where Picasso was personally and politically at the time he painted them. But like I said, the exhibition had over 100 artworks. You're talking about a man who had an output every couple of days. Le Rêve, of course, is famous for having its elbow put through it by Steve Wynn. Luckily, you can't see the elbow mark. Le Rêve is huge, by the way, but I did look very closely and you couldn't see any damage from the elbow. And of course, Steve Wynn's got slightly more profound issues these days. But this is a wonderful exhibition catalogue. You can, of course, buy this from the Tate. You can also buy it online from Museum Bookstore. And I would recommend this book unequivocally. I'm a Picasso fan and I thought I'd seen everything, but this is a great catalogue that doesn't patronise but is informative like the exhibition itself. This is a truly great purchase. Picasso 1932, The Exhibition.